The news came like a storm that no one could have predicted. Imagine holding your child in your arms, looking into their innocent eyes, and realizing that the world you promised them has just shifted in an instant. That is exactly what happened to Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the moment he learned that King Charles had confirmed a decision that would forever remove Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana from the line of succession. A decree so profound, so unprecedented in modern history, that it shook the foundations of the monarchy itself. And the way Harry reacted, well, it was nothing short of explosive. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would you do if your children, your very own flesh and blood, were told they no longer mattered in the grand scheme of one of the most powerful institutions in the world? Would you fight? Would you run? Or would you try to find a way to bend the rules that seemed set in stone centuries ago? Harry faced that exact question, and his answer would reveal not only his fury, but also a side of him the public rarely sees, a side defined by raw emotion, fierce loyalty, and a willingness to challenge tradition like few in the royal family ever have. The decision didn't happen in isolation. It didn't come out of nowhere. There were whispers in the palace corridors, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and an intricate network of advisors and confidants, all shaping the course of events long before the public even got a glimpse. Yet, even with all that build-up, the official confirmation was a hammer blow. One moment, Archie and Lilibet were secure in their futures, their place in the line of succession guaranteed by birthright. The next, their positions were erased, deleted from history as if they had never existed. And Harry's reaction was immediate and intense. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and cornered all at once. But beneath the anger, there was also a deep, burning sorrow. A sorrow not just for himself or Meghan, but for Archie and Lilibet, who were too young to understand the weight of what was happening. They were innocent children caught in a political and familial storm, their identities now tied to a controversy they could not possibly comprehend. Meghan, of course, was no stranger to scrutiny, but even she had been blindsided by the scale of this decision. The Duchess, who had always carried herself with poise and strategy, found herself in a rare moment of shock. She had anticipated public criticism, tabloid attacks, even whispers of exclusion. But nothing had prepared her for the permanence of this action, the sense that the monarchy itself was drawing a line that, once crossed, could not be undone. The realization of what this meant for her family hit her with the weight of history itself. What makes this moment so extraordinary is not just the action itself, but the timing. In an era where the monarchy has been increasingly scrutinized, where the world watches every public gesture and every private decision, this move was both bold and dangerous. It sent ripples far beyond the palace walls, reaching the tabloids, social media, and even the Commonwealth countries that still hold the British monarchy in high regard. Public opinion was not just divided, it was volatile. Every headline, every social media post, every whispered conversation contributed to a pressure cooker of emotion that would define the next chapter of Harry and Meghan's lives. And yet, even as the world erupted in speculation, rumors, and outrage, there was a part of this story that few outside the palace could understand. The private exchanges, the secret discussions, the subtle gestures that revealed loyalty or betrayal. All of it painted a picture far more complex than any newspaper could capture. Harry's fury was not just about the succession line. It was about trust. It was about family. It was about knowing that the institution he had once served with unquestioned loyalty had, in that moment, turned its back on him and his children. To understand the gravity of this situation, one must consider the history of succession itself. For centuries, royal children have been groomed from birth, their futures dictated by bloodlines and ancient rules. To remove a child from that line is not just symbolic, it is seismic. It alters dynasties, changes public perception, and in some cases, sparks international debate about the legitimacy and relevance of the monarchy in modern society. And yet, the way this was carried out, quietly, formally, and with the unmistakable authority of the king, left no room for negotiation. There was no middle ground. There was only a stark, undeniable truth. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana were no longer part of the succession, and their father had to decide what to do next. Harry's next steps, of course, were a mixture of strategy and instinct. In private, he debated how to respond, weighing the consequences of public outrage against the need to protect his family. He considered the media, the legal possibilities, the historical precedents. But mostly, he felt the raw, unfiltered emotion of a father who had just been told his children were no longer recognized by the very system meant to secure their future. His fury was not theatrical, it was primal, and it set the stage for actions that would reverberate throughout the monarchy for years to come. The question that now hangs over the entire situation is simple, yet terrifying. Can a modern monarchy survive a rupture like this? Can a family weather the storm when loyalty, tradition, and love collide in such a dramatic fashion? And most importantly, what will Harry, Meghan, and their children do in response to a decree that seeks to define their destinies without their consent? The story that is about to unfold is not just a tale of royal drama. It is a window into the human side of power, a reminder that behind every crown, there are people with hearts, fears, and the capacity for both incredible courage and devastating anger. And as we delve deeper into the events, the conversations, and the secret maneuvers, you will begin to understand why this moment is not just newsworthy, it is historic. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Harry's reaction, Meghan's decisions, and the unexpected alliances forming behind palace walls would create a series of events that no one outside could predict. Secrets would be revealed, loyalties would be tested, and the fate of Archie and Lilibet would hang in the balance in ways that would shock even the most devoted royal watchers. This is the story of a family, a monarchy, and a decision that could redefine what it means to inherit a legacy. Stay with me, because what follows will take you inside the corridors of power, the private rooms of a palace, and the hearts of two parents fighting for the future of their children. And it all begins with a single, irreversible announcement, a moment that would ignite fury, fear, and a determination to defy the system itself. The announcement came like a thunderclap, sudden and jarring, echoing through the corridors of Buckingham Palace and reverberating far beyond its historic walls. Imagine being Harry at that very moment. The words delivered with cold, unflinching formality, the weight of centuries pressing down on him, and the realization sinking in that the futures of his beloved children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, had just been rewritten, erased, in the eyes of the monarchy. It was one thing to anticipate criticism, to brace for public scrutiny, but it was entirely another to face an official confirmation that effectively removed your own children from a centuries-old line of succession. The details were delivered with a formality that only royalty can muster. The words were precise, deliberate, almost surgical. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana would no longer hold a place in the line of succession. No justification, no elaborate explanation, just a cold decree that carried the authority of a king. For those in the room, the impact was immediate. For Harry, it felt like betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak rolled into a single moment. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the tension of unspoken words, hushed breaths, and the subtle shuffle of advisors shifting uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't just what the announcement said, it was how it was delivered. Harry, who had always tried to navigate palace life with a mixture of diplomacy and authenticity, felt the full weight of the institutional power arrayed against him. Every gaze, every silence, every measured pause was a reminder that this was not merely a personal matter, it was a statement of authority. And yet, it was personal, intensely personal. His children, the very beings he had sworn to protect, were now subject to the cold machinations of a system that had never truly accommodated him, Meghan, or their vision of family. As Harry processed the announcement, his mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. Could this be reversed? Was there room for negotiation behind the polished palace walls? And if not, what did it mean for the children he loved so fiercely? The sheer audacity of it. The permanence, the officiality, the disregard for the emotional toll, struck him like a physical blow. And while Meghan, ever the composed strategist, absorbed the news with measured concern, Harry's immediate reaction was one of raw, unfiltered fury. The palace itself was a stage, but behind the grandeur and protocol, tension crackled like static electricity. Advisors whispered among themselves, each weighing how much information could be shared, how much control they could maintain over a situation rapidly spinning beyond anyone's expectations. The decision was final, but the implications were enormous. It wasn't merely about titles or positions. It was about identity, legacy, and the very fabric of a monarchy that had long been defined by bloodlines and unbroken traditions. Outside the walls, the world was unaware, yet poised to react. Imagine the global audiences, millions of people who follow the royal family with fascination, suddenly hearing that the youngest generation, the children of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, had been officially removed from the line of succession. Speculation would erupt, narratives would form, and social media would explode with opinions, theories, and outrage. And all of this would happen before anyone even understood the human side of the story. The heartbreak, the fury, the private family conversations that were now thrust into the public eye. What made this moment so seismic was the combination of timing and context. The monarchy had been navigating a modern era of scrutiny, documentaries, interviews, media scandals, and public debates about relevance and reform. The Sussexes had already positioned themselves as a family that sought autonomy, agency, and, at times, defiance against tradition. And now, with this announcement, the monarchy was asserting its authority in a way that was as dramatic as it was definitive. The decision wasn't just about succession, it was about control. It was about reminding the world, and the family, that the system could dictate terms, even to those who had once appeared untouchable. Inside the palace, reactions varied but were uniformly tense. Some whispered words of caution, warning Harry to contain his response, to think strategically. Others, quietly observing, recognized the significance of his emotional reaction, the fire in his eyes, the clenched jaw, the way he paced the room as if the very air were constricting around him. The message was unmistakable. Harry's fury was real, and it would shape the next moves in a drama far larger than anyone outside could imagine. And yet, even as the announcement settled into the minds of those present, there were layers of secrecy and intrigue that no official statement could capture. Private conversations, subtle gestures, and coded messages exchanged between family members and advisors hinted at alliances, betrayals, and decisions yet to come. Harry knew that the official confirmation was only the beginning. The palace might have set the stage, but the real battle, emotional, strategic, and deeply personal, was just beginning. The children themselves, oblivious to the storms swirling around them, were the emotional anchor for Harry and Meghan. Every thought of Archie and Lilibet brought a surge of protective instinct, a determination that this decree would not define them entirely. And yet, the emotional weight of the announcement was inescapable. For a father who had once served in the military, who had faced danger and adversity with composure, this was a different kind of battle, one that attacked the heart, not the body, and one that carried stakes higher than any battlefield he had ever known. Publicly, of course, the announcement would be sanitized, couched in diplomatic language, carefully framed by royal press releases. But behind closed doors, the reality was starkly different. The anger, confusion, and sorrow were palpable. The internal monologues of those involved, Harry, Meghan, Charles, and even the advisors, were filled with questions, doubts, and a gnawing sense that the future had shifted in ways no one could control. The palace, a place of centuries-old tradition and protocol, had just become the epicenter of a deeply human drama, one defined by love, loyalty, and the raw emotion of a father fighting for his children. And as the room emptied, the hushed tones fading into the palace corridors, one thought remained lodged in Harry's mind. How would he respond? Would he accept the decree, bow to the authority of the crown, and try to protect his family within the constraints imposed? Or would he challenge it, confront it, and take steps that could redefine the monarchy itself? The tension was unbearable, the stakes unimaginable, and the path forward uncertain. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. A private message, a whispered warning, a secret plan, something small, seemingly insignificant, yet potent enough to ignite a series of events that would shake the monarchy and set the stage for a confrontation that the world would not be ready for. The official announcement was just the beginning. The real story, the one that would captivate, shock, and move millions, was about to unfold. Harry's fury was not subtle. It wasn't the polite indignation of a gentleman affronted in public. It was raw, primal, and immediate, coursing through him like a live wire. Imagine being told that the children you love more than anything in the world, the children whose every laugh, every small achievement, every bedtime story has shaped your heart, have been officially erased from a centuries-old legacy, a line of succession that carries more weight than most of us could ever comprehend. That's what Harry felt, and he felt it all at once. Shock, betrayal, heartbreak, and anger so potent it threatened to consume him. The announcement had barely left the lips of the messenger when Harry's mind went into overdrive. Memories flooded him. Moments with Archie on the floor of their Los Angeles home, giggling over toy cars, or teaching Lilibet to wave and smile at the camera, oblivious to the weight of the world around her. These were moments no decree could erase, yet the king's words attempted to diminish them, to reduce them to insignificance in the cold logic of monarchy. The contrast was jarring. One world was filled with laughter, innocence, and love. The other was a centuries-old system of rules, power, and hierarchy that demanded compliance, loyalty, and submission, even at the cost of family. Harry's fury wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. He was thinking, analyzing, calculating, as he always had. The anger that coursed through him became a tool, a lens through which he examined every angle. Could this decision be reversed? Was there leverage within the system that he could exploit? Could the court of public opinion be used to challenge the decree? And if so, how far could he push before the system pushed back? Every thought carried a tension between instinct and intellect, between raw emotion and the need to navigate a labyrinth of royal protocol. The private fury was far more intense than what anyone outside the palace could imagine. While the public might picture a duke calmly voicing objections to advisors, Harry's reality was a storm of emotion, reverberating in every corner of his being. He clenched his fists, paced in a controlled rhythm, muttering to himself, imagining the scenarios, calculating every possible outcome. And all the while, there was an undercurrent of sorrow, a deep ache for the children whose futures were suddenly threatened. Not by chance, not by circumstance, but by the deliberate, formal decision of a parent and monarch. Even Meghan, ever the composed figure, could see it. She watched Harry navigate this private storm with a mix of concern and admiration. She knew he felt betrayed on a level that transcended protocol or public perception. Yet she also knew that fury could be channeled. That anger, if managed and focused, could become a force powerful enough to protect the family and challenge the system itself. In their private conversations, Harry's voice shook, not just with anger, but with determination. Every word, every gesture, every decision he considered was driven by a combination of love, protection, and righteous indignation. The fury was also deeply personal. For Harry, the monarchy had always been a paradoxical institution, a source of duty, tradition, and identity, yet also a place of constraint, scrutiny, and unspoken tension. He had grown up under the gaze of the public eye, the media's relentless attention, and the complex politics of royal life. And now, the system he had once respected so deeply had acted against his children, erasing their place in a legacy that was meant to include them by birthright. The betrayal cut deep, not just as a matter of protocol, but as a fundamental attack on his role as a father, protector, and partner. Harry's fury also carried an element of disbelief. How could this happen? How could the king, his father, take such a permanent, irrevocable step? He had imagined disagreements, debates, and even potential tensions with Charles, but nothing had prepared him for this definitive action. And yet, as much as he felt outrage, he also understood the mechanics behind it. The monarchy operates on centuries of tradition, rules, and precedents, and the weight of the crown carries a cold authority that few can challenge. He knew this, but knowing it didn't soften the blow. The Duke's fury manifested in both private reflection and immediate planning. He considered allies, family members, advisors, trusted friends who could provide counsel or assistance. He thought about the media, about public perception, and the potential power of narrative in challenging authority. Every scenario carried risk, But every scenario also carried potential. The anger, raw and intense, fueled a strategic mind that refused to accept the decree as final without exploration. At the same time, there was fear, subtle but persistent. The decisions Harry might take could have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for Meghan, for the children, and for the monarchy as a whole. Each action would be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged by the world. Yet the fear was not paralyzing. It was catalytic, sharpening his focus, intensifying his determination, and deepening the emotional stakes. Throughout all of this, Harry's fury was interwoven with sorrow. The juxtaposition of power and love, of legacy and family, created an emotional tension that few outside the palace could fully comprehend. He grieved the loss of certainty for Archie and Lilibet, the innocence that was now entangled in public controversy, and the sense of security that a royal lineage is supposed to provide. That grief, alongside the anger, created a storm that would dictate his next steps, fueling both strategy and emotion in equal measure. And yet, even in the midst of this fury, there were glimmers of clarity. Harry recognized that his emotional response could become a tool, a way to channel power into action. He understood that the decision was a challenge, not just a setback, and that the future, though uncertain, was not beyond his influence. The anger, channeled with precision and determination, could become the very instrument that allowed him to protect his family and challenge the status quo. But what came next would escalate the situation in ways no one could have predicted. A private confrontation, a whispered warning, a subtle shift in palace dynamics. These small, almost imperceptible events were about to ignite a chain reaction. Harry's fury would no longer be private. It would ripple through the palace, the media, and the world, forcing decisions and alliances that would shape the next chapter of this unfolding drama. And at the center of it all would be two children, innocent and unaware, whose futures hung in the balance as their father prepared to confront a system that had dared to erase them. The moment had passed, but the storm was only beginning. The fury was no longer just emotional. It was strategic, unstoppable, and ready to challenge the very institution that had once defined Harry's life. And as the next moves began to take shape, the world would start to see a side of the Duke of Sussex that few had ever witnessed. A man pushed to the edge, a father defending his children, and a royal confronting centuries of tradition with the fire of determination burning in his heart. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Hidden alliances, secret conversations, and unexpected decisions were about to redefine the stakes, and the consequences would be felt far beyond the palace walls. Harry's fury was only the beginning of a story that would shock, captivate, and transform the perception of monarchy in ways the world was not prepared to witness. While Harry's fury erupted like a storm, Meghan's reaction was far more subtle, yet no less powerful. She didn't scream, she didn't pace, she didn't let anger blaze across the room in dramatic waves. Instead, she felt the weight of the announcement settle on her shoulders like a stone, cold and unyielding. Imagine holding your child close, knowing their futures have just been rewritten, and feeling a quiet shock that doesn't scream but resonates in every part of your being. That was Meghan's reality at that moment. Her mind raced, tracing every possibility, every angle. She had always been strategic, always anticipating criticism, public judgment, and the harsh glare of the media spotlight. But even she hadn't anticipated this, an irrevocable decree, confirmed by the king himself, that effectively erased Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession. It was one thing to hear whispers of tension, rumors of family disagreement, or subtle hints of disapproval. It was entirely another to have a formal decision handed down, a finality that carried centuries of tradition and authority behind it. Meghan's shock wasn't silent in the sense of passivity. It was a concentrated, focused energy, a mental and emotional assessment of what had just occurred and what must come next. Her thoughts darted in every direction. The impact on her children, the implications for Harry, the potential public fallout, and the strategy required to protect her family. Unlike Harry, whose fury was immediate and visceral, Meghan processed the situation with measured intensity, her mind calculating next steps, while her heart ached with the reality of what had been done to her children. She thought about Archie first. The little boy, just learning about the world around him, would never understand why his place in history had been quietly removed. And Lilibet, so young, so innocent, yet already born into a life that demanded scrutiny and adaptation. How would she navigate a world where the rules seemed stacked against her before she had even begun? Meghan's heart broke for them, but she knew that despair alone would accomplish nothing. Action, strategy, and precision were required. She had survived public scrutiny before, endured tabloid attacks, and navigated the relentless pressure of being in the royal eye. This was different. It was personal, systemic, and immediate. But the tools she had developed over years of navigating adversity could now be deployed to protect her children. There was also the matter of Harry. She saw his fury, raw and uncontained, and recognized the intensity of his response. She understood that his anger was both a strength and a potential risk. While his determination could drive action, it could also provoke confrontation. Meghan's mind worked to temper the storm, to channel Harry's fury into strategic avenues that could advance their cause without triggering irrevocable backlash. It was a delicate balance, requiring patience, subtlety, and an unflinching understanding of palace dynamics. But Meghan's shock wasn't purely strategic. There was deep emotional resonance in this moment. She remembered the struggles she had faced before joining the royal family. The scrutiny, the judgment, the subtle and overt exclusion from certain circles. And now, decades of experience in navigating such environments culminated in this moment of family crisis. The irony was almost palpable. Meghan had once been the subject of media campaigns, public judgment, and royal scrutiny, but now the stakes had escalated to her children. And the weight of that reality pressed heavily upon her. Her shock also carried a sense of disbelief. How could a system so steeped in tradition, so careful in its rules and procedures, act in such a definitive way against children who had done nothing to provoke controversy? Archie and Lilibet had been born into a legacy, yes, but they had done nothing to deserve exclusion. The decision felt punitive, almost personal, and the implications extended far beyond the immediate family. Meghan understood that this was not just a private matter. It was a story with global resonance, a narrative that could shape public perception, media coverage, and even the legitimacy of the monarchy in the eyes of the world. In the quiet moments after the announcement, Meghan reflected on the enormity of what had occurred. Every glance, every word, every pause carried meaning. She considered the optics, the potential media fallout, and the strategies required to manage the situation. And while her shock was silent externally, internally it fueled a growing determination. She would not allow this decree to define her children's futures. She would find ways to navigate, challenge, and protect, using every resource at her disposal. There was also the question of alliances. Meghan knew that navigating palace dynamics required careful attention to relationships, both public and private. She thought about who could be trusted, who could provide counsel, and who might act in self-interest. In a family where tradition often clashed with personal loyalty, discerning allies from potential threats was crucial. Meghan's shock sharpened her awareness, heightening her ability to read situations, interpret gestures, and anticipate moves before they were made. And then there was the emotional labor of it all. Meghan's shock was intertwined with grief, a deep-seated sadness for the injustice done to her children, the betrayal by a system that should have protected them, and the realization that the path forward would be arduous, complex, and fraught with obstacles. Yet, even in the midst of this grief, there was clarity. Meghan knew that silence, strategy, and patience could become powerful tools, enabling her to navigate the crisis with precision, protect her family, and prepare for the confrontations that were sure to come. Her silent shock was also a mirror to Harry's fury. While his anger was immediate, hers was reflective, analytical, and strategic. Together, they formed a balance of emotional intensity and calculated planning. A combination that would become their strength as they faced the cascading consequences of this unprecedented decision. The synergy between Harry's raw emotion and Meghan's measured strategy was about to define the next moves in a story that would grip the world. But the quiet shock would not remain quiet for long. Small signals, subtle communications, and unexpected maneuvers behind palace walls were beginning to shift the dynamics of power. Allies would emerge, loyalties would be tested, and Meghan's growing determination would become a force that no decree could suppress. And as the first ripple of their response began to take shape, the world had no idea that the storm was about to escalate into a confrontation that would redefine the monarchy and the lives of two innocent children forever. What came next would push Meghan from silent shock to decisive action, and the repercussions would be felt far beyond the walls of any palace. The children's future, Harry's fury, and the monarchy itself were now locked in a tension that could only be resolved by choices both bold and unprecedented. The gravity of the situation became painfully real when Harry and Meghan turned their thoughts fully to their children. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana were innocent, unaware of the storm now swirling around them, yet they were at the center of a historic decision that could shape the rest of their lives. For any parent, this is a nightmare scenario, to know that your children, through no action of their own, are suddenly facing a future defined by exclusion and a system that has seemingly erased them from legacy. Imagine being Harry. He had trained for combat, endured the scrutiny of the military, and faced challenges most of the public could scarcely comprehend. Yet none of that prepared him for this moment, a moment in which the safety, status, and identity of his own children were at stake, and the threat was institutional. The monarchy, an entity built on centuries of history, had formally removed his children from the line of succession. In a single act, it had questioned their relevance, their recognition, and, by extension, the rights of their father to protect them within the system he once served. Meghan, meanwhile, wrestled with a different but equally intense emotional load. Her shock, which had been quiet and reflective, now transformed into a proactive concern for the psychological and emotional well-being of her children. Lilibet and Archie might not understand the mechanics of succession, the significance of lineage, or the traditions underpinning the monarchy. But Meghan knew they would feel the ripples, the subtle tension, the way conversations changed when their names were mentioned, the invisible pressure of a world suddenly redefining their place. Protecting their innocence while navigating the harsh reality of their situation became paramount. The children's future was no longer abstract. It was now a battlefield. Every decision Harry and Meghan made would carry consequences, and every move by the monarchy could influence the trajectory of their lives. Harry, in particular, understood that this was a pivotal moment, one in which his role as a father intersected with his understanding of institutional power. He needed to balance his instinct to protect with strategic action, a challenge made exponentially harder by the formal nature of the king's decree. Legal implications weighed heavily on their minds as well. The rules of succession are deeply embedded in law, tradition, and precedent. Changing the status of a royal child is not merely symbolic. It has far-reaching consequences, potentially affecting inheritance rights, titles, and public recognition. Harry and Meghan now had to consider every possible legal avenue, every potential loophole, and every angle of influence that might allow them to safeguard their children's position, or at least protect them from the worst of the repercussions. Historically, the exclusion of heirs has rarely been straightforward. Royal families across Europe have faced disputes, rivalries, and political maneuvers that shifted the lines of succession for strategic purposes. Yet even in history, few examples involved children as young and as publicly visible as Archie and Lilibet. Their situation was unprecedented in modern memory, a fusion of personal, political, and media-driven pressures converging on two lives that had barely begun. Emotionally, the toll on Harry and Meghan was immense. They had built a life for their family with careful attention to love, security, and identity. This decree disrupted all of that, introducing uncertainty into every decision, from schooling to public appearances to the environment in which their children would grow up. Every conversation now had an undercurrent of tension. What could be said? What could be done? How much could be protected without inviting scrutiny or retaliation from the institution that had imposed the change? And yet, even in the face of such profound disruption, Harry and Meghan remained resolute. They recognized that the children themselves were powerful motivators. Archie, curious, intelligent, and lively, had an unspoken resilience. a spark that reminded Harry of the importance of defending their right to grow and thrive. Lilibet, still a toddler, embodied innocence and vulnerability, magnifying the stakes in ways that no abstract discussion could. Every decision, every strategy, every conversation now orbited around the singular goal of protecting these two children from the full force of a system that had redefined their place in history. Public perception also played a crucial role in the calculus of their next steps. Harry and Meghan were acutely aware that the world would judge every reaction, every move. The media, social platforms, and public opinion could either serve as a shield or a weapon. Protecting their children meant navigating a landscape in which every action was scrutinized, every word dissected, and every image interpreted as a signal of intent. This was no longer a private family matter. It had become a public and symbolic struggle, representing themes of fairness, tradition, and parental love under the harsh glare of global attention. And yet, there was hope, a glimmer in the midst of adversity. While the decree had formal authority, the world outside the palace walls was not bound by the same rigid constraints. Allies could be found, strategic narratives could be shaped, and the support of the public could amplify the position of the children, giving Harry and Meghan leverage that was intangible yet powerful. The question became how best to harness that potential while maintaining the dignity and safety of their family. Every day brought new challenges. Simple actions, attending an event, making a public statement, even choosing a place to live, carried implications that could ripple across the monarchy. Decisions that might seem ordinary to most families now became calculated maneuvers in a game of influence, perception, and legacy. And every night, as Harry and Meghan reflected on the day's developments, the same thought echoed in their minds. The children's future was at stake, and every choice mattered. The tension extended beyond immediate strategy. There was a profound emotional component. How to explain this new reality to the children? How to maintain their sense of normalcy while confronting a situation that could define their identity and place in the world? Harry and Meghan understood that innocence could be preserved, but only through careful, deliberate action and a deep commitment to shielding their children from unnecessary exposure to fear, confusion, or hurt. And yet, even as they strategized, they had to contend with the unpredictable human element. Reactions from the monarchy, the media, and the public could shift at any moment, creating new pressures and altering the dynamics of power. Every conversation, every report, every subtle movement within palace circles could influence the trajectory of their children's future, and Harry and Meghan knew they had to remain vigilant, adaptive, and united. But what came next would reveal just how high the stakes truly were. The children, innocent and unknowing, were about to become central figures in a drama that would extend far beyond their private lives. Hidden forces, secret maneuvers, and unexpected alliances were beginning to emerge, threatening to redefine not just their status, but the very perception of the monarchy itself. And in the midst of it all, Harry and Meghan would have to make decisions that would echo for decades, shaping the lives of Archie and Lilibet in ways that no one could have anticipated. The future of the children was no longer a distant concern, it was the immediate battleground. And as the next moves began to unfold behind closed doors, it became clear that the stakes were higher, the challenges greater, and the consequences more profound than anyone, even Harry and Meghan, had imagined. From the outside, King Charles's decision appeared cold, almost mechanical, a formal decree delivered with the precision and authority expected of a monarch. But beneath the polished surface, the move was calculated, strategic, and deliberate, shaped by years of experience, counsel, and an acute awareness of the ripple effects across both the family and the monarchy. Charles was no stranger to high-stakes decisions. He had spent decades navigating the treacherous currents of royal politics, balancing duty, tradition, and the delicate psychology of a family whose public and private lives were inextricably intertwined. This action, removing Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession, was not an impulsive choice. It was a decision meticulously crafted to assert authority, maintain control, and send a message that reverberated far beyond the palace walls. Imagine, for a moment, the mental calculations behind the king's move. Every step, every word, every formal statement was weighed against centuries of precedent. Charles understood the optics, the historical context, and the potential backlash. He knew that the decree would provoke outrage, inspire debate, and spark media frenzy, but he also knew that, executed properly, it would reinforce his authority as the head of the monarchy. It was a calculated risk, one that balanced familial tension with institutional preservation. Charles's advisors had undoubtedly played a role, offering input, historical analogies, and potential contingencies. Yet ultimately, the decision rested with him. In a system that prizes hierarchy, tradition, and loyalty, the king's word is law, and he wielded it with full awareness of its consequences. This wasn't just about succession. It was about sending a message to the family, the public, and the institution itself. The monarchy is a system larger than any individual, and deviations, even those born of love, defiance, or personal conviction, must be contained, managed, and controlled. Harry and Meghan's public positioning had long challenged the monarchy's traditional narrative. By stepping back, relocating to the United States, and asserting their independence, they had already introduced a variable that the institution had struggled to accommodate. For Charles, the removal of his grandchildren from the succession line was a decisive step in reasserting control, a way to reinforce the primacy of monarchy over individual choice. The decree was symbolic, yes, but it was also tangible, a visible demonstration of authority that could not be ignored or circumvented. Yet, as calculated as the move was, Charles had to anticipate consequences. Family loyalty is fragile, especially in a household where personal grievances and historical tensions intertwine with public duty. By taking this step, he risked not only Harry's fury but also Meghan's strategic response, the potential mobilization of public opinion, and the unpredictable consequences of media exposure. Every decision has a cost, and Charles knew that this one carried both immediate and long-term implications for family cohesion and institutional stability. The psychological component of the decision was equally critical. A monarch's power is not just legal or procedural. It is symbolic, rooted in perception, respect, and, at times, fear. Charles understood that removing Archie and Lilibet sent a message, not just to Harry and Meghan, but to all members of the royal family. Authority is to be respected, tradition upheld, and deviations controlled. Yet he also knew that the personal nature of the action would provoke emotional reactions, and he had to navigate the fine line between exercising authority and provoking open rebellion or public dispute. In private, the king's deliberations were likely complex. Advisors would have provided historical analogies, past instances where heirs were excluded, the outcomes of family conflicts, and the potential legal ramifications. He would have considered public perception, both domestically and internationally, and weighed the importance of reinforcing the monarchy's image against the human cost to his children and grandchildren. Every facet of the decision was deliberate, reflecting not only institutional priorities, but also the psychological game of managing a family whose lives are under global scrutiny. The moment of delivery was as important as the decision itself. Charles chose a method that conveyed authority without excessive theatrics, a formal confirmation that left no ambiguity. The precision of language, the measured tone, and the calculated distance all underscored the seriousness of the decree. To the outside observer, it might have seemed like a simple statement of fact. To Harry and Meghan, it was a declaration with profound personal and familial implications, a move that demanded an immediate emotional and strategic response. And yet, even with all the calculation, Charles could not entirely control the consequences. Human emotion is unpredictable, and family dynamics are rarely linear. Harry's fury, Meghan's measured strategy, and the global media response were variables that could not be entirely contained. The king's move had set events in motion that would cascade beyond his control, highlighting the tension between authority and consequence, between calculated strategy and the unpredictable nature of human response. This calculated move also reflected a broader understanding of legacy. Charles was acutely aware that the monarchy exists not only in the present, but also in history. Every decision contributes to the narrative that will be recorded, analyzed, and debated for generations. By removing Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession, He was not only asserting authority in the present, but also shaping the historical record, reinforcing a vision of monarchy that prioritizes structure, hierarchy, and control over personal relationships or public sentiment. And yet, there were subtle cracks in the calculation. Personal loyalty, public sympathy, and the unpredictable nature of Harry and Meghan's responses introduced elements of risk that even a seasoned monarch could not fully anticipate. The decision, while deliberate, was a catalyst, setting off a chain of events that would test relationships, challenge assumptions, and force confrontations that no formal decree could entirely control. The palace corridors, once silent after the announcement, began to hum with tension. Advisors whispered speculations, staff observed subtle shifts in behavior, and family members grappled with the emotional weight of the king's move. Every glance, every gesture, every conversation became loaded with meaning, as if the entire institution were holding its collective breath. Charles had acted decisively, but in doing so, he had unleashed a storm that would ripple through the monarchy in ways he may not have fully anticipated. But what came next would expose vulnerabilities no one expected. A secret communication, a subtle warning, and a series of hidden maneuvers were already in motion. Charles's calculated move, designed to assert control, would collide with the fierce determination of a father, the strategic precision of a mother, and the unpredictable forces of public scrutiny and media pressure. The ripple effects of this decision would not only shape the lives of Archie and Lilibet, but also redefine the perception of monarchy for a global audience, challenging assumptions and forcing adaptations that would echo for decades. The king's move was deliberate, methodical, and authoritative, but the next phase, already quietly unfolding behind palace walls, threatened to turn strategy into chaos. The story was far from over, and the consequences of this calculated act would reveal themselves in ways that no formal decree could predict. The public rarely sees what happens inside the walls of a royal palace. They see the pageantry, the official appearances, the carefully staged photos. But behind closed doors, the corridors of Buckingham, Windsor, and other royal residences hum with tension, whispers, and maneuvers that could change the course of history. The announcement that Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana had been removed from the line of succession set off a storm within these walls, a drama hidden from public view, but charged with raw emotion, strategy, and power. Inside the palace, every gesture mattered. Advisors whispered in hushed tones, each word weighed for its political and emotional consequence. Courtiers watched reactions carefully, noting every flicker of the eye, every subtle shift in posture, every tight-lipped pause. The king had delivered a formal, calculated decree, but the aftermath, the human response, the tension, the private confrontations, was unpredictable and volatile. Harry's fury had already begun to radiate. Meghan's quiet intensity had shifted into strategic calculation, and other family members were processing the news in ways that could ripple outward in unexpected directions. The palace, for all its grandeur, became a stage for human emotion. Arguments flared in private rooms. Alliances shifted silently as individuals assessed where their loyalties lay. Some were loyal to the king's decision, valuing tradition and the authority of the monarchy above personal sentiment. Others quietly sympathized with Harry and Meghan, aware of the injustice of the decree and wary of the public backlash if the family appeared divided. Every conversation, every exchange, carried weight. A single misstep, a single word overheard, could become a catalyst for further tension, media speculation, or family conflict. Imagine the tension in the room when Harry confronted advisors and family members in private. His anger was not just performative, it was calculated and penetrating. Each question he asked, each glance he cast, was intended to probe motives, test loyalty, and uncover hidden agendas. Meghan, ever the strategic mind, observed quietly, noting alliances, gauging reactions, and preparing contingencies. Together, they navigated a landscape fraught with subtle manipulations, veiled warnings, and the pressure of centuries of precedent that hung over every interaction. And yet, palace drama is never just about strategy. It is intensely personal. Family members wrestled with conflicting emotions, love for their kin, loyalty to the monarchy, and the fear of being on the wrong side of history. Words unspoken carried meaning, and silence often communicated more than speech. The removal of the children from succession was not just a legal or procedural matter. It was a symbolic act that resonated with every member of the royal family, forcing them to take sides, consciously or unconsciously. In the midst of these dynamics, small incidents gained outsized significance. A lingering glance in a hallway, a whispered comment over tea, a hesitant nod during a meeting, each became a signal, a test of allegiance, or a hint of rebellion. The human element of the palace. The emotions, the personalities, the ambitions, added layers of complexity that no formal decree could fully account for. Every person became a variable in a high-stakes equation, and the consequences of their choices would reverberate far beyond the immediate moment. Meanwhile, the staff and advisors played their own roles in this drama. Many were caught between loyalty to the king and empathy for the duke and duchess. Some quietly offered counsel to Harry and Meghan, while others moved to reinforce the authority of the decree. Rumors began to circulate through the palace, subtle, almost imperceptible signals that hinted at potential rebellions, alliances, or secret communications. Every gesture, every subtle shift in behavior, became part of a complex, unfolding narrative that the public would never fully witness. The emotional stakes were also profound. Harry's fury was contagious, a palpable presence that influenced those around him. Meghan's strategic focus added a counterbalance, creating an atmosphere of intense, calculated tension. Family members, advisors, and staff all felt the pressure, knowing that any misstep could escalate conflicts, expose secrets, or invite scrutiny. In this environment, trust became a precious commodity, loyalty a delicate thread, and every interaction a potential flashpoint. Historical context added further complexity. The royal family is no stranger to internal conflict, secret communications, and hidden power struggles. Yet, even with centuries of precedent, the combination of public exposure, media scrutiny, and the emotional intensity surrounding the removal of Archie and Lilibet created an unprecedented situation. Every decision had consequences. Every interaction carried potential ramifications, and every private conversation could alter the course of events in ways no one could predict. The private discussions were intense, sometimes confrontational. Advisors debated strategy, weighing the potential for reconciliation against the risk of public conflict. Family members expressed anger, frustration, or disappointment, often in hushed tones. Harry and Meghan navigated these interactions with skill, testing boundaries, probing motivations, and gathering information that would shape their next steps. The palace had become a pressure cooker, and every interaction added fuel to the fire. And in the midst of all this drama, subtle communications carried enormous weight. A note left on a desk, a whispered message passed between aides, a phone call carefully timed, all became tools in a game of influence and strategy. These hidden channels, invisible to the public, were critical in shaping the unfolding story. They allowed Harry and Meghan to gather intelligence, understand potential alliances, and anticipate moves that could impact the future of their children. Yet for all the strategy, the human element remained unpredictable. Emotions ran high, loyalty shifted unexpectedly, and personal agendas sometimes clashed with institutional priorities. The palace drama behind closed doors was not merely procedural. It was a living, breathing interplay of human behavior, emotion, and calculation. Each person's choice, each whispered comment, each subtle movement contributed to a complex web of relationships that could either stabilize the situation or accelerate conflict. But what came next would tip the delicate balance entirely. A small, seemingly inconsequential interaction, a private message, or an unnoticed gesture was about to ignite a sequence of events that no one in the palace had anticipated. Hidden tensions, carefully nurtured alliances, and subtle betrayals were converging in ways that threatened to alter the narrative, challenge authority, and place Archie and Lilibet at the center of a storm that was only just beginning. The drama behind palace doors was no longer contained. It was a living, evolving force, shaping decisions, testing loyalties, and creating an environment in which the next move could redefine the monarchy, the family, and the very future of two innocent children. The world outside had no idea, but within the walls of tradition, power, and secrecy, a battle of influence, emotion, and strategy had begun, and no one would remain untouched. As the news of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana's removal from the line of succession reached the outside world, it ignited a media frenzy the likes of which few events in modern royal history have ever seen. Across television networks, online platforms, and social media, headlines screamed, opinion pieces multiplied, and discussions erupted across continents. For Harry and Meghan, the private storm inside the palace had now spilled into the public domain, amplifying both pressure and stakes in ways that were immediate and impossible to ignore. The global reaction was polarized almost instantly. On one side, traditionalists and monarchy supporters viewed the decision as a necessary reinforcement of royal protocol. They praised King Charles for asserting authority, maintaining the integrity of the institution, and ensuring that succession adhered strictly to centuries-old rules. In their eyes, this was not cruelty, it was duty. By removing the children from the line of succession, the king was protecting the monarchy from potential dilution, controversy, and unpredictability. On the other side, public sentiment was more sympathetic to Harry and Meghan. Many viewed the removal of their children as unfair, punitive, and emblematic of a system that seemed out of touch with modern family values. Social media campaigns emerged almost immediately, with hashtags trending globally, debates breaking out in forums, and millions expressing outrage at what was perceived as an injustice. For a generation already skeptical of traditional authority, the story became a symbol of a system prioritizing legacy and hierarchy over love, fairness, and parental care. The media coverage was relentless. Newspapers printed exclusive interviews, insider analyses, and speculative pieces on palace dynamics. Television networks dissected every possible implication, bringing in historians, royal commentators, and psychologists to interpret the decision and its emotional impact. Online, viral threads circulated with speculation about family rifts, potential legal challenges, and even the long-term psychological effects on Archie and Lilibet. Every angle was explored, every rumor amplified, and every subtle detail dissected. For Harry and Meghan, the flood of media attention was both an obstacle and a tool. On one hand, it increased stress, pressure, and public scrutiny. Every action they took, every word they spoke, would be dissected and potentially used as ammunition by critics. On the other hand, media visibility provided an opportunity to shape the narrative, to garner support, and to counterbalance the authority of the palace with public opinion. The key lay in strategic engagement, knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and how to navigate a media landscape that could be both ally and adversary. The frenzy also revealed the power of perception. While the monarchy had the authority to make formal decisions, public opinion wielded a different kind of influence, emotional, widespread, and often unpredictable. People felt deeply about this story, not just as observers of royalty, but as participants in a cultural conversation about fairness, family, and institutional power. Harry and Meghan quickly realized that controlling the narrative was as critical as responding to the decree itself. Public support could provide leverage, but missteps could escalate criticism and complicate efforts to protect their children. International reaction added another layer of complexity. Commonwealth nations, many of which still maintain a strong connection to the British monarchy, watched closely. Governments, media outlets, and citizens debated the implications, considering the decision not only in terms of royal protocol, but also in terms of global perception, soft power, and historical precedent. The removal of Archie and Lilibet resonated far beyond the UK, illustrating the monarchy's influence and the far-reaching consequences of its internal decisions. Social media, in particular, became a battlefield. Platforms exploded with analysis, speculation, and personal reactions from millions. Memes circulated, hashtags trended, and countless posts debated the morality, legality, and emotional impact of the decision. For Harry and Meghan, navigating this virtual storm required careful attention. Social media could galvanize support, mobilize allies, and amplify outrage, but it could also magnify criticism, perpetuate false narratives, and exposed their family to relentless scrutiny. Every public engagement now had to consider not only traditional media, but also the sprawling, unpredictable ecosystem of online discourse. Amidst the media frenzy, the children themselves became symbolic figures. Archie and Lilibet were not merely affected by the decree, they became the focal points of public debate. Innocent faces, photographs, and public appearances were interpreted as statements, evidence, or commentary on the unfolding drama. The intensity of this spotlight added urgency to Harry and Meghan's decisions, highlighting the need to protect the children from both emotional and reputational consequences while managing a narrative that was now impossible to ignore. The coverage also revealed contradictions and tensions within the royal family. Some family members quietly expressed sympathy, while others reaffirmed loyalty to the king's decision. Media speculation amplified these divisions, creating a perception of conflict, disunity, and intrigue that further complicated the public story. Each revelation, rumor, or carefully curated statement became a potential catalyst, shaping opinion, influencing narrative, and adding pressure to an already high-stakes situation. For Harry and Meghan, every headline, every viral post, and every news segment became part of the battlefield. They had to consider the impact of public sentiment on their strategy, the potential for legal and diplomatic consequences, and the emotional well-being of their children. The media frenzy was relentless, but it also provided visibility, a platform from which to assert perspective and influence opinion. They had to navigate carefully, balancing defense with discretion, anger with strategy, and personal emotion with public messaging. And yet, the frenzy was only beginning to unfold. As the world reacted, as debates intensified, and as speculation grew, Harry and Meghan understood that the situation required decisive action, careful communication, and unwavering focus on the children's future.